Everyone.
Political. Yeah.
Good morning, all. Welcome to this meeting of the Northern Area Planning Committee on 17th of March. It's one of three based area planning committees of Dorset Council. For the benefit of the public attending today or watching on live stream, I'm Councillor Richard Crabb of Sherborne West, chair of this committee. My vice chair is Councillor David Taylor from Chancellor St Mary's. I need to mention straight away that I've decided to defer the second item on today's agenda. That is for the application number WD/D/19/002710 land for the George Albert Hotel and Southern Counties Leisure, Warden Hill, Dorchester. The reason for that is that the parish of Frew St Quintin has not had the opportunity to comment on this application. They must be provided that opportunity. So this application will most likely be heard at the Northern Area Planning Committee meeting to be heard in April. I can only apologise to the people who have taken the trouble to get here today. I will allow some time for anyone to leave if they have come for item number 2. Don't think there is anyone, so that's good. So we'll carry on. We must have been able to get the message out in time, so that's very good. So the members of this committee are Councillor David Taylor, Chancellor St Mary's, Councillor Barry Cooper, Winterbourne North, Councillor Alex Brenton, Little Travers and Upton, Councillor Sherry Jesperson, Hillthorpe and Pertarrants, Councillor Carol Jones, Sturmson Newton, Councillor Rory Major, Dorchester East, Councillor Val Potterbury, Gillingham, Councillor Belinda Rideout, Gillingham, Councillor James Vitale, Stourbridge and Marner, Councillor S. Fry, Dorchester West, and Councillor Carl Wood of Gillingham. Support our Democratic officers here today are John Miles and Bluey Wicks, and being supported by Hannah Smith for planning and Lara Altry for legal. Live streaming. The meeting is being live streamed and will be available to view on the council website afterwards. By attending this meeting, you consent to being filmed. Can I remind everyone that when you are speaking, please speak directly into the microphones so that you can be clearly heard and seen. Please can I also remind members about discussing applications with one another during adjournments or even in quiet periods. We are aware that microphones will pick up conversations for them only to be broadcasted later. The Planning Committee is not a public meeting, but a meeting to which the public is invited. All attendees must comply with the ruling of the chair. They must not interrupt the meeting nor cause undue disturbance. To support this, please switch off your mobile phones or select silent mode for the duration of the meeting. And those using Teams, please ensure microphones are on mute and your device volume is set to 0 to maintain your audio quality. I think it might be useful to explain the format of this meeting to members of the public. This committee is a structured meeting whose purpose is to decide planning applications. The way that it works is that there are 12 members, including the chair. Planning officers present planning applications to the members and to the public, along with recommendations. After that, objectors, supporters, and applicants have strictly 3 minutes each to speak. Local ward members also have 3 minutes to speak. Once the public speaking is complete, members of the committee then ask mostly technical questions of the officer about the application. Once those are satisfied, we move on to the debate amongst the members. At the end, the vote is taken to determine the planning application. The nature of the meeting is that strictly no questions or interruptions may be made by anyone who are not on the committee. Also, no papers or evidence can be handed to the committee at any time. Just to remind everyone, only those who have registered to speak in accordance with the speaking protocol will be invited to address the committee for a maximum of 3 minutes. We have one planning application to determine today. It is land north of Castle Avenue, Oakwood Fixtay. I think it will take roughly an hour and a half to decide, but it could be longer or shorter. For all applications, the case officer will be invited to present their report and recommendations. Speakers will be invited to speak either in favour or against the application. Committee members will be given the opportunity to ask questions of the planning officers before moving on to the debate. At the end of the debate, I'll take the vote by a show of hands. The voting detail will be recorded in minutes if 3 or more members make the necessary request. For each application, the case officer will be invited to present their report and recommendations. Then I will ask members of the public who have registered to speak in the following order: public against, public support, applicant or agent, town and parish council, board members. Members of the public and speakers, please come to the small table at the front, the red cloth. When I call your name, sit down so that you're close to the microphone. Turn on the microphone by pressing the right-hand side button and press again to turn it off when it's finished. Please speak clearly. I'll give you a heads up when you have 30 seconds left, or 3 minutes. Following public speaking, the planning officers will have the opportunity to address any salient points they wish to clarify, and committee members will be given the opportunity to ask questions of the planning officers before moving on to debate. When you go into councillor questions and debate, for the benefit of the public watching, can members please state their name and board when addressing the meeting, always directing comments via the chair. Now, I will start the agenda. Apologies. We have received apologies from Councillor Lesbry, Councillor James Vitale, Councillor Rory Major, Councillor Carl Wood, and Councillor Belinda Wright. Declarations of community interest or other conflict of interest or predeterminations. Should something come up on the meeting that you think you should declare, then please let me know straight away. The minutes of the last meeting. Please can we, by a show of hands, approve the minutes of the last meeting held on Tuesday, 10th of February. I signed after the meeting. Okay, thank you everyone. Public participation. Members of the public wishing to speak to the committee on a planning application should notify the Democratic Services officer no later than 2 clear days before the meeting. The deadline for this meeting was Friday, 30th of March at 8:30 AM. Okay, so we have one planning application. This is P/FUL/2025/03574. Land north of Castle Avenue, Oakwood Fixtay, is to erect 78 dwellings to form vehicle and pedestrian access, landscaping, open space, and drainage attenuation. This was presented by Rob McDonald. Rob, would you like to please go ahead? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. So yes, this application for members this morning seeks full planning permission to erect 78 dwellings, form vehicular pedestrian access, landscaping, open space, and drainage attenuation out there of Castle Avenue for this paying. Just as the full statement, there's 58 slides This recommendation, something be on screen briefly. I've noted all of them heading of each slide, so these will read to make a note of any slide I'm going to go back to at the end. Let your questions and debate. I'll just start by running through some of the site context for you. Is the 3.8 hectare greenfield site shaded red on the west side of Castle Lane, northern end of the village, situated outside of and adjacent to the south boundary for the village, by the black line on that. The site joins to the north of a recent development that's been built out for 27 dwellings known as Conwick. If the photos are taken from the proposed access point towards the northern end of the site, looking back south towards Conwick, you can see, well, hopefully you can make out in the photo, the southern boundary, some newer hedgerows and trees is fairly exposed at present. You can see the relatively flat nature of the site, and it does live away slightly towards Castle Cottage on the left-hand side, and then towards a ditch in the northwest corner. The site is otherwise enclosed by hedgerows and some hedge trees, which you can hopefully see from these photos. The native hedgerow along the northern and western boundaries are protected by a historic TPO. There's also a category A oak tree within the site itself. Towards the northwest corner, just present a green ring around the top photo, and that's also protected by a tree preservation law. On the opposite side of Castle Lane is the main recreation ground for the village and pavilion, and some very sort of modest play equipment. This map shows the site relative to the nearest designated heritage assets. So you've got some red stars there showing listed buildings, and blue dotted area is the conservation area. There's no designated heritage assets in the site itself, but as highlighted, there's a grade 2 listed building of Castle Cottage just adjoining to the southeast border of the site. Boundary of the conservation area is 150 metres south of the site. Further afield and beyond the map on the screen, we've got a number of scheduled monuments ranging from about half a kilometre to 1.6 from the site. And there's no non-designated heritage assets on the site which are identified, including in the archaeology. This map shows the site relative to flood risks in the locality. It's in flood zone 1, as the map on the left indicates, and then on the right shows that the site contains only a small sliver of low surface water risk towards the east boundary, but importantly not where any built developments can be proposed. At its closest point, the site lies some 440 metres north of the Dorset National Landscape boundary, showing sort of dark red brown colour there, stretching into the southern part of the village and sort of further towards the southeast. Otherwise, the site's within the rolling Vales landscape character type, which is the kind of yellow green shading. The map also just shows the site relative to the wider public rights of way, and none of which pass through the site itself. So this is the site plan of the proposed development. You've got Conwick to the south, Castle Cottage over here to the east, recreation ground over here, TPO, the northwest corner. And you will see this plan again during the presentation, but I completely have the edge into your memory, and I'll come back to various points. So these are the key planning considerations for this case. I'm sure everyone's well versed with committee reports, so I won't go into great detail. I'll just summarise each of these in the next set of slides. Just to set the scene, I'm sure members will recall last year the council had an annual position statement that confirmed that the whole of the Dorset Council area could just about demonstrate a 5-year land supply. And that was the position at the time the application was submitted. However, the APS expires on the 31st of October last year. But just beforehand, the council did publish its latest 5-year housing land supply position statement, using the latest housing requirement and local needs. And in short, it confirms that the council could only demonstrate the deliverable housing supply equivalent to 2.53 years. This is clearly at a serious level of housing need. So according to the NPPF, indicates that housing policies within the local plan should be considered out of date, and that the tilted balance presumption in favour of sustainable development applies in decision making for housing proposals. The mentioned site lies beyond the settlement boundary of Oakford Fitzpaine, and it's a type of development that would conflict with the spatial strategy policies in the local plan. But notwithstanding this, the location of the site would be within 800 metres by pavements or a 10-minute walk to highlights here with blueprints, the various village facilities, got the village shop, the post office, public house, church, village hall, vehicle repair garage, a couple of children's play areas and a recreation ground. The village has a reasonable level of facilities to meet some day-to-day needs, still regarded as a sustainable larger village for growth. Major residential development in Oakford Fitzpaine provides an opportunity to enhance or at least maintain the viability of the village. Key to the success of this would be ensuring the site is suitably connected to the rest of the village. So this slide shows dark green line there, the existing pavement connectivity shown from Conway down into the village and its various facilities. At the moment, if someone wanted to walk or wheel to the main recreation ground, they need to traverse a section of Castle Lane, past Castle Cottage, which obviously will be particularly sensitive. A proposal seeks to address this by including a link at the southern end through the site from Conwick, at this point shown on the illustrative plan on screen. And easement for this and maintenance arrangements has been agreed with the adjoining landowner, so it's a viable proposition. And final details of this connection, the crossing point will be secured by condition, just to ensure that it can be scroll, including those with protected characteristics. In addition to that, there's a new crossing point, proposed new crossing point at the northern end of the site, whereby the vehicle access point across Castle Lane provides pedestrian access to the recreation ground, the opposite side of the road. Then there'll be a path through the eastern side of the public open space. We can link those two connection points and enable future occupiers to navigate into the village and access the services and facilities as well as the recreation ground. And that pathing will also provide a safe off-road pedestrian connection between the RAC and the remainder of the village, improving accessibility to wide green infrastructure and supporting healthy lifestyle. So these things will provide a substantial public benefit in terms of wider village connectivity. As well as supporting services and facilities in Oakford Fitzpaine, major residential development will also support services in neighbouring streets. Showing some orange pins in the main out the various services and facilities in neighbouring streets. That includes the nearest primary school and industrial estate, and also will support other villages and towns in the locality. Village also benefits from a bus service, runs weekdays between 7 AM and 7 PM, provides a means of alternative transport between flats within the overall. Taking all these points into account, the location would not be unsuitable. Officers and the applicant have identified this list of designated heritage assets which potentially be affected by the proposed development. Also included the agreed assessment of harm to the significance of each of these. There'll be no harm to the majority of the assets, including the conservation area. The exception would be less than substantial harm at the lower end to significance of grade 2 Sleep Castle Cottage. The next series of slides will just focus on that particular heritage asset. It is a historic England's listing description for this asset quite brief, and mainly just highlights its architectural interest. This value is the most apparent from its principal elevation. See here, facing directly onto Castle Lane. This also agreed that there's elements of the cottage's setting which also contribute to its significance. This includes its rural location of the village, which allows it to be experienced within historic agricultural settings. You can see here historic maps which highlight this was particularly evident up until the Second World War. Other elements of the cottage's setting that contribute to significance are, as you can see in the photo, its immediate spatial and visual relationship with Castle Lane, and the shape and extent of its plot, parallel with the road, which is characteristic elements of buildings constructed on wasteland as a result of post-medieval built boundaries, so you can make out the blue. But the rural setting of the site has already been somewhat eroded by infill of land between the cottage and its historic core, with post-war and more modern developments making town. You've got the post-war here in Commonwealth, and presents the background of the cottage. It's recognised that the proposed zoning should further diminish the contribution of parcel land maintenance. However, the centre part would be reduced by limiting the dwelling heights to 2 stories, retaining a degree buffer to its west to ensure the cottage contains a degree of screen setting and a visual buffer. These factors will ensure that avoids dominating the listed building. However, taking place at the ruined cottage, the visual experience and understanding of historic and architectural interest with principal front elevation appreciated. Castle Lane would not be affected, but remain appreciable. The elongated shape and extent of its plot will also be unaffected and remain appreciable. So taking these points into account, as accept that was the proposal would result in less than substantial harm to the significance of the asset through impact on the setting. The degree of that harm would be towards the lower end of the category. As the less than substantial harm has been identified, both local and national planning policies dictate that this degree of harm needs to be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal, such as on screen, the raft of public benefits that would come with the scheme. Officers consider that collectively these would outweigh the lower end less than substantial harm was to Castle Cottage. The proposed development would comprise 78 dwellings across a 3.8 hectare site, so that equates to a density of some 20.5 dwellings per hectare. This is comparable with densities of physical development within the village, including those on the edges, and therefore it's not uncharacteristic or inappropriate overdevelopment for a village fringe location. But for housing mix, the precise targets set out in Policy 7 at the local plan would be exactly matched, but the smaller home, larger home favour targets for both market and affordable housing would still be met, so the mix would be inappropriate in that sense. All of the units would be minimum national space standards, so there'd be adequate living conditions for future occupiers. The layout of the development would have a clear privacy of informal perimeter blocks, which is a positive design approach and not common with new housing developments in the edge of villages. Dwellings would positively address streets and open spaces. The use of how streets terminate with either dwellings or open space has also been independently considered and designed in. The proposed development would have no greater uniformity than other streets within the village, including more historic streets, which feature stretches of consistent building setbacks. Also, we've got a couple of CGI artist impressions. On the left, you've got one of the main streets passing through the middle of the site, and then on the right is the gateway curved border building on arrival into the site. These visuals indicate that streets would have sufficient space for street trees and front gardens, present some attractive spaces, and avoid the sense of buildings incongruously dominating scrutiny. You can see this as another CGI visual of how the scheme may look. You can see maybe make out there's a line on there, sort of dark red here. A building line of dwellings in that southeast corner, closest to the cottage, is approximately in line with the equivalent build form already along the west side of Castle Lane, so giving a sense of development setback and respects that spaciousness. And we also benefit Castle Cottage, of course, retains prominence within the street scene. Southwest corner of the site has been improved during the course of the application. This is a sketch, and it is just illustrating that there's actually for a more spacious space, a courtyard approach, street trees, including one in the centre, just to give a means of further enhancing visual appearance of this particular part of the scheme. In terms of scale, the variety of house types would be no greater than 2 stories in nature, appropriate for its edge of village location, characteristic of its pain. In terms of appearance, dwellings would feature architectural detailing reflective of the village vernacular, including roof detailing, chimneys, porch styles. The palette of materials proposed includes red, buff, painted brick, flint, timber cladding, slated paint roofs. Cardboards around the signs, we single stories observing buildings to the dwellings composed of similar synthetic materials. Given all of those proposed materials are evident throughout the village, the palette would take reference to local character and be appropriate. Conditions recommended to control the final details of the external materials just to ensure they be appropriate for the village context. On screen is the indicative soft landscaping plan. This can be finalised as part of recommended condition 12. You can see there'll be a generous amount of green space, including good solitary gardens, landscape buffers around boundaries, public open spaces in the northwest and eastern side of the site. So reaffirming the sense that the site will be overdeveloped. The public open space on the east side will include play area for young children, the community orchard up here, position of play area, which is this area here, be appropriate given that it has some natural surveillance for dwellings and sufficiently separated from the curtilage of the listed building. And then protected oak tree would be retained, protected from encroachment, and celebrated within the site. The largely perimeter block road layout is logical and safe, some subtle curves just to add interest, footways are present throughout the majority of the site. There's some limited shared surfacing towards the southwest corner, which are not common in village housing schemes, and it's not attracted any higher authority objection. The development would provide a total of 144 allocated parking spaces and 19 visitor spaces. All of the houses would have at least 2 parking spaces each, parking benefiting from 1 parking space each. To comply with building regs, there'd be 1 electric vehicle charging space provided per dwelling. In terms of parking style, there'd be tandem spaces, side-by-side bays, courtyards, carports. So not an unappealingly repetitive singular design solution. Parking designs are comparable and not out of character with other recent developments in the village. Cycle revision would be 1 space per dwelling, provided within the curtilage of each dwelling. In sheltered and secure storage would be a communal and secure cycle parking for flats. And then final part landscape details, including ground treatments, can be controlled by recommended condition 13, just to ensure in that context. Those are landscape effects. The design currently reflects a moderate contribution to the character of Dorset rolling Vales landscape character area. However, its rurality, sense of remoteness, and contribution to the surrounding land use fields has been eroded by recent expansion of the settlement, which has resulted in some suburban influences and weak settled edge at the moment. Whilst the proposal will permanently change that baseline condition of the site, it's accepted that the key identified landscape features would largely be retained and enhanced, so their contribution to the landscape character area will continue. The development would create a new recognisable feature within views, replacing the current views of existing development on the Wink, with the retention and enhancement of existing mature field hedges and planting new hedgerows and trees along the north boundary would create a reasonably well-defined new central boundary, help to mitigate current and proposed build form. The visual from a viewpoint along the public footpath just beyond the west of the site illustrates that the effects of the proposed development would largely be limited to a local level due to the buffering and enhancement of existing trees and hedgerows around the edges of the site and the relatively enclosed nature of the link landscape. It's quite dark, certainly coming down the bottom photo. Thanks to proximity, it's inevitable that the scheme would be immediately visible from within the street scene of the adjoining Commonwealth. but there'll be some additional landscaping provided along the southern boundary, just to improve this interface and soften that. As mentioned earlier, the site has the potential to affect the setting of the national landscape designation. I'm sure members may be aware that the planning authority has a statutory duty to seek to further the purpose of conserving and enhancing the natural beauty of the national landscape, and decision making this duty includes development affecting the setting. How well you can make that out on screen, but this visual shows that in combination with other recent developments, the proposal would highlight this. It's not there if you make that out on screen. Along with a combination with other recent developments, the proposal would expand the village envelope further eastwards along the horizon. However, also consider that the additional impacts of the proposed development would not be significantly detrimental to the setting of the Dorset national landscape to an extent that provide a strong reason to refuse planning. There's no specific and substantial impacts on the special qualities of the national landscape that result in harm to the setting of it. There's no street lighting proposed that may accentuate the impact of the development at night or lower light conditions. So overall, officers accept that subject to materials and landscape conditions, the visual impact of the proposal, including within the local setting, wider landscape, be acceptable. This brings the applicant's proposed drainage strategy to deal with surface water and foul drainage. In terms of some features, an open attenuation basin in the northwest corner of the site, and there'd be in addition to tanks, it proposed to attenuate surface water before discharging and restricted rain into the nearby watercourse. Overland flow routes would mostly discharge either towards the attenuation basin in the northwest corner or otherwise into public open spaces. The strategies have been amended during the course of the application to take account of new national SUD standards. There's now also incorporating permeable paving, rain gardens, swales. Foul water from the development would be disposed of via a connection to the existing drainage network running along Castle Lane. So it's reacted down to Castle Lane. That was confirmed that the attenuation basins have been designed in accordance with the established sustainable drainage guidance and considered safe without the need for special physical measures such as fencing or life-saving equipment. In normal circumstances, the basin would be dry and only holds deeper water during very rare extreme rainfall events. So this slide shows some sections through the basin. Illustrates their side slopes would be gentle. There'd be 3 meter maintenance margin around the top of the basin, providing clear separation from areas used by residents. There was a holding objection from the legal authority, but that's been withdrawn. Following the further information provided and some conditions that also been recommended. Council's housing enabling team have confirmed that at the time of their comment, there were 16 houses on the housing register that declared a connection to open fixed paying, and further 45 households listing the village as a preferred area. The application proposes the policy compliant figure of 40% affordable housing for a countryside location. That's supposed to 31.2 units with a 10 split, reflected 70% in favour of affordable rent, 30% of shared ownership through immediate housing. The remaining 0.2 of a unit would be secured as a community sum required for off-site affordable housing. The applicant has indicated that there's a potential scope to provide 100% affordable housing on the site through additionality. In such an event, officers agreed that the community sum would not be required. Either scenario would provide substantial benefits. A draft section 106 agreement is currently being worked on to secure this affordable housing contribution, as well as necessary obligations to make acceptable planning terms and maintain and enhance the level of bravery and social infrastructure set out in the local plan. This includes necessary and evidenced financial contributions towards improving healthcare and education provision in the locality. Applicants agreed to all of these obligations and contributions, and there's a draft on 6 currently in work. Proposed vehicular access to the site will be formed in the northeast corner, directly onto Castle Lane. This plan screen demonstrates that the required visibility displays can be achieved in each direction for a road subject to 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. A condition could be imposed to ensure displays get free from obstruction. Road layout is capable of meeting adopted requirements and could be fully serviced by refuse vehicles. So vehicle speeds of 20 miles per hour or lower. So the highway authority considers the internal roads is considered to be safe and suitable for road users. The site's not previously been identified as comprising any priority habitat or any other ecological designations, or does it adjoin these maps? The site, show the site, sorry, red star would be the main count, relative to national environmental designations at the top and then local designations on the bottom. The site does lie within the outer fringes of a couple of tripler site impact zones, but it's not the type of development that would adversely affect either of those tripler sites. The submitted ecology report reveals that the site supports an assemblage of bats, and that's of at least regional importance with the surveys of the site in 2024 reporting 13 species, including nationally rare greater horseshoe, barred cell, and numerous other priority species, some of which are known to be sensitive to lighting. As a plan on screen indicates, the western and northern boundaries of the site have been identified as being particularly important for bats. Through some subtle amendments to road layout towards northern boundary and positioning of some units, the revision of grassland buffers and dark corridors around the site would be improved to support continued use by foraging and commuting bats. So the thermal lighting, there is any complete control by condition. Under BNG, a minimum 10% gain can be achieved on site for each habitat, hedgerow, water course unit. Finalised habitat management and monitoring plan will need to be submitted to satisfy the statutory biodiversity gain and condition, and a monitoring fee for BNG is included in the draft of legal agreement. With regards to TVO Oak, special engineering measures and supervised excavations within the tree roots protection area are supported and can be conditioned. The applicants also confirmed that there be no crown lifting or reduction of the oak tree. Certain parts can be diverted to avoid its root protection area. Accordingly, the tree also raises no objection with regards to the impact on protected trees and hedgerows. Only a small section of hedgerow, which is not subject to TPO in the northwest corner, which should be removed to facilitate that vehicular access. But again, no objection raised by the tree officer on that. There is another category A oak tree down here, within the curves, it's actually within the curves of Castle Cottage. There'll be no encroachment into its root protection area. It's mostly going to be the open space, but there will also be some tree protection fencing around it during the construction phase. In terms of impact on neighbouring community, separations between the nearest neighbouring properties would range from 20 metres to 39 metres, which is not common or unreasonable separation distance. Bolstering vegetation towards the southern and eastern boundaries will also help to provide a good degree of intervening screening. The layout of the scheme itself has also been designed to avoid any mutual amenity issues with back-to-back separations, either at least 20 metres or building orientated in a way that would only enable obtuse angles of sight. Conditions are recommended to ensure any potential disruption from construction activities can be controlled. Finally, in terms of the loss of agricultural lands, the applicants provided an agricultural land classification report just confirming the authority of the site compliance grade 3B, which is moderate agricultural land. Rest of most versatile agricultural land is grade 1 to 3A, so the development would avoid the loss of the best of any best and most versatile agricultural land. So apply with that relative half of what's boiling. Just a few bonus photos. Here is on the site in Castle Cottage from road within Conway. Make out Castle Cottage there. Another photo is from the entrance point of Conway, so site back here. west, where a couple of public footpaths cross each other, and the land that just falls away towards the west to this point. So you might just see, can't quite make that over here, there's some rooftops and chimneys, so it'd be a similar kind of effect from here. So the time balance, in the recap, given the council currently can't demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, paragraph 11b, the NPPF, utility balance and presumption in favour of sustainable development is engaged. With a low level of less than substantial harm to castle cottage outweighed by public benefits of the proposal, and no significant harm caused to the setting of Dorset national landscape, there's no strong reasons to refuse planning permission under paragraph 11d1 of the NPPF. So it follows that paragraph 11d2 is engaged, whereby planning permission should be granted unless any adverse impacts of doing so significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in the framework taken as a whole. We have in particular regard to key policies for directing development to sustainable locations, making effective use of land, securing well-designed places, and providing affordable options. In addition to less than substantial harm to Castle Cottage, weighing against granting planning permission is the proposal's conflict with the local land spatial strategy housing development. However, given the council's 5-year housing land supply position, and the fact the site is well located to a reasonable provision of local services and facilities, only very limited weight can be given to this conflict. Weighing significantly in favour of granting planning permission is the provision of 78 houses, including policy line figure affordable housing, which is also afforded significant. Substantial weight of favour is also given to the fact that the proposed development would provide wider village connectivity with a new pedestrian link passing through the site, safely connecting the village to the main recreation grounds. The proposed design and visual impact of the scheme would be acceptable. This, along with the provision of on-site public open space, a new village play area, financial contributions towards infrastructure, economic benefits from construction jobs, supply chain, local expenditure can all be afforded moderate weight in favour of granting planning permission. It's therefore apparent that there's no adverse impacts that would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the proposed development. As such, the proposal benefits from the NPPF's presumption in favour of sustainable development is recommended for approval, subject to conditions and the completion of Section 96 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Rob. We now come to the speakers. Please bypass sign reader to speak. If you'd like to come to the desk in the front, I'll give you 3 minutes with a 30-second warning towards the end. Thank you.
Right-hand button.
Right-hand side, yeah.
Thank you for letting me speak as a villager from Oakford. There is already planning permission for over 70 dwellings here, adding to the 75 completed in the last 2 years. This application is for a further 78 dwellings. Cumulatively, and compared to the size of our village, this is significant development. Paragraph 110 of the NPPF is clear. Significant development should be focused on locations which are or can be made sustainable. Oakford Fitzpay may once have been considered a sustainable location, but it is no longer, nor does this development make it sustainable. This proposal therefore fails that test. The report also claims that our village offers a reasonable level of facilities to meet day-to-day needs. This is no longer true. Our school is closed, the shop has been for sale for 2 years, our pub operates on restricted hours, and public transport's cut back. The report wrongly suggests this development would support local jobs. Houses are already built on our former employment sites. Once construction jobs have gone, local jobs will once again depend on tourism, farming, and equestrian businesses. These depend on rural charm, the very thing this scheme would damage. Let's be clear, Oakford is not on any main road or transport corridor. It cannot be compared to larger, more connected settlements. Our already limited bus service is vulnerable to being reduced further as the Oakford Loop takes time. The Marnhall Loop was cut in very similar circumstances. Furthermore, this scheme is expected to support the services in Shillingstone as a cluster. Have any of you tried to walk or cycle the 2 miles from this site? There is no bus on the weekend and a 2-hour wait on weekdays. The report itself admits there are issues with pavement safety and lack of pedestrian crossings, and that even with improvements, routes may still not be safe. These concerns are known and acknowledged. So why is no funding proposed for better public transport, roads or safe pedestrian routes? Your urban design officer recognises what many villagers already see. Successive developments have eroded the character and rurality of Oakford-Fitz-Payne. The use of harsh red tiles and suburban layouts is completely out of keeping with the traditional village form. The officer's professional advice in the report is clear. The proposed design detracts from the historical scale and pattern of development and would cause harm to the sensitive rural edge of the village. This echoes the sentiments of everybody I've spoken to. They also state that the proposal clearly conflicts with the National Design Guide, the NPPF, and Policy 24 of the North Dorset Local Plan, all of which require development to enhance, not undermine local character. Please can this committee consider whether its approach to planning villages such as Oakford-Fitz-Payne is
30
really
seconds
working?
left.
It is not delivering better infrastructure. It is creating dormitory car-dependent settlements. The local need for affordable housing is already been met by the existing developments. The report is wrong and out of date on this. The school drop-off point that was planned is now pointless. Why isn't the council rethinking its approach rather than planning on regardless? Please give us the same fair consideration you expect for your own communities. Listen to your own urban designers' clear warnings about design and setting. Recognise that we're not on a main road network and should not be treated as if we are. Our village is already more than contributing to housing need. Further expansion will not make it sustainable as required by national
Okay,
policy.
thank you. Your time is up. Thanks very much. Can I now ask Alison Roberts to speak, please? Okay, when you're
Press the
ready,
button, sorry.
Right-hand
3
side.
minutes.
Okay. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Alison Roberts and I live in the centre of Oakford-Fitz-Payne within the conservation area. My objections to planning being granted for this development is regarding my grave concerns relating to road safety for all users. The village is surrounded by stables and horses being ridden around the village is part of the culture, part of the conservation that we're meant to be protecting. The village has several families with school-aged children, all of whom, due to the lack of local facilities, are required to catch buses and coaches to take them to school. Due to the historical nature of the area, there is a lack of appropriate infrastructure around the village, with very little footpaths or footpaths allowing more than one person to walk. Even in the developments that have been recently built, there is no safe passage from the houses to the centre of the village, meaning the cross, and around the old school. Despite this being in the planning of Shillingstone Fields, the footpath promise has never been built. Pedestrians have to walk in the road. Shillingstone Lane has at least 2 blind corners as you leave the village, and there is another blind corner by the pub where the cross meets Castle Lane. Despite a recent reduction in speed limit in the village, the speeding still continues. There is a very limited public transportation, meaning the majority of villagers rely on cars. I myself work in Poole, and when I leave for work at 7:30 in the morning, I regularly come across school children walking in the road, as they have to, from Shillingstone Fields development to the bus stop opposite the old school. Often, this is on the blind corner, I'm tucked into the left. Timed wrongly, this could result in a serious accident. The same issue occurs on the Commerwick side of the village and the area of this proposed development. There is very little footpath from Commerwick up to the cross, with the road narrows, and having recently walked to the parish council meeting at the pavilion this month, we felt very unsafe and had the impression that at least 3 cars were going to hit us as they sped along Castle Lane. Please visit at rush hour if you wish to see what traffic is really like. If all homes with proposed planning permission are granted and built, this would result in around a 40% increase in houses in the parish, with each house having at least 1, if not 2 cars or more. Having already noticed an increase in cars within the village from the developments that are occupied, the increase in houses and therefore cars will mean it will be dangerous to walk around the village. Horses, tractors, cars, walkers, dogs, cyclists, children, everyone will be at risk. This won't just impact Oakford-Fitz-Payne, it will impact surrounding villages such as Shillingstone, Turnworth and
30 seconds left.
Turnworth in particular is a regular route taken to Oakford Hill for those travelling to Blandford and Poole. It doesn't even have a 30 mile an hour, and disrespectful drivers approach speeds at far higher than should have to suffer. Increasing the number of cars will increase the risks here too. If these properties go ahead and result in a serious accident where someone has life-changing or loses a life, that cannot be undone. So please consider the people of this village when making your choices.
Okay, thank you very much. So I now ask Ken Hart to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, members. The applicants have successfully delivered the adjoining development at Cumberwick, which is 100% affordable housing, which is fully occupied and is a successful development. And they wish to add to that success, providing more affordable homes within this area where there is a housing need and where the housing price is 13 times the average salary. Members, the Council's critical land supply issue means that proposals for additional housing in sustainable locations must be approved unless there are strong reasons for refusal. Your own policies identify Oakford as a sustainable location. The presumption in favour is set out in national policy, and it applies in this instance with full weight. But members, the applicants also wish to present their proposal to you as an extremely well-designed development, which will provide a high-quality residential environment appropriate to the immediate and wider setting of the site, and which is acceptable in all regards. The layout and design has evolved through several rounds of full consultation with your officers, who agree it to be appropriate to the rural location, appropriate to the landscape setting, to the edge of the village, and to the village itself. The proposals represent a spacious development within the landscape, creating a place with its own identity, but very much referenced and linked to the main settlement. The proposals provide a good mix of homes to meet local needs, including policy-compliant levels of affordable housing, mostly family housing, on good-sized, generous plots, providing good living conditions for future occupiers. The majority of the properties present towards the newly created areas of public open space and the edges of the site. And within the core, you've seen the slides of the layout providing a planted streetscape with pedestrian priority and views through to the public open spaces. Again, a high quality residential environment. And the overall scale, design and use of materials reflect the village vernacular and character. Members, the proposals are of the highest quality in terms of design and layout. This is not a matter of a fine balancing exercise as such, because the land is suitable, the land can be developed, and the scheme does represent the creation of a quality residential environment against which there are no significant adverse impacts to be balanced. A fully detailed transport assessment demonstrates there are no highway safety or capacity issues, and one of the benefits being put forward to you is enhanced connectivity to the village and safer connectivity to the village to allay concerns that you've just heard. The public benefits from the scheme are significant for the wider community, including the additional supporting services within Oakford Fitzpaine and the neighbouring villages.
Members, 30 seconds.
Members, it shouldn't be lost on you that rural services decline when they are not fully supported, and planning over the last decades has resulted in no additional housing in rural areas to support rural services. The current policy is to reverse that and to provide additional housing to support and improve rural housing and the rural economy for the benefit of rural communities. Members, we ask you to support your officer's recommendation on this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I now ask Councillor Rachel Rowe to speak on behalf of Oakford Fitzpaine Parish Council?
Right-hand side one, yeah?
Yes.
Right-hand button.
Right, thank you for letting me speak. Oakford Fitzpaine Parish Council strongly opposes this additional 78 home development on the northern edge of the village. Since 2018, the village has seen 3 developments at Old Dairy, Shillingstone Fields and Cumberwick. This has added 110 homes to a village of about 400 properties. Homes remain unsold on Shillingstone Fields and the affordable housing has been slow to take up. Construction of 27 homes has now started on Playdales. A further 48 houses have been granted on the Wessex Park site in 2024, which has recently been put up for sale. This level of growth is disproportionate to our village, local needs, and does nothing to reverse the decline in local employment or infrastructure. It further suburbanises our rural village and sets an unhelpful precedent for more of the same. Since 2016, Oakford Fitzpaine has lost its industrial units, the bus services have been cut and the primary school is closed. Unlike Shillingstone or Marnor, to which we have been compared, Oakford Fitzpaine is not on the main road. It is therefore less attractive for employment opportunities and is car dependent. There is no safe walking or cycling route to Shillingstone, which this proposal is said to support, because of the lack of pavements, usable footpaths and speed of traffic. Bus services run 2 hourly during daytime and not at weekends, limiting employment opportunities and access to key services for people who do not drive, including those in the affordable housing. There is no response from your public transport team, so no assurance this will be improved. We receive a lot of concerns about school places. We are therefore disappointed to see the Education Authority has not submitted a report on capacity in local schools to assess the rising demand due to developments, as this gives no assurance of guaranteed places at Shillingstone School. It is concerning that despite more houses, infrastructure in Oakford Fitzpaine has deteriorated significantly. As we are a car-dependent village, a large development like this will result in increased traffic. We are concerned that a narrow pinch point at the new cross junction on the A357 will become congested with queuing, risking collisions. The Parish Council requested an update on the Affordable Housing Register from Dorset Council. This was received on the 10th of March. In August, there were 61 households with either a local connection or stating a preference to be housed in Oakford. Now, this figure is just 21, so a drop from 61 to 21. This remaining need will be met by the housing already being built. The Parish Council has already seen evidence that some of the affordable housing is being allocated to people who do not have a local connection to the area and who are not in employment. These are vulnerable people with no social support network placed in a rural area with poor transport and a lack of infrastructure. While people have to live somewhere, there is a lack of support for these people who will become part of our community. In conclusion, the Parish Council has tried to engage with Dorset Council several times to discuss a strategic managed approach to developments and supporting infrastructure and has not received a response. We have requested our larger village on Tier 3 status be downgraded and have not received a response or update.
Okay,
Dorset Council is failing to plan positively for its rural areas. It seems to have no plan.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I now ask Councillor Steve Mercer to speak?
I take it this microphone's still on. Yes. Thank you very much for letting me speak at this committee today. I wish to object to this planning application, and I'd like to build on some of the points made by the speakers before me. You've already heard that development should be focused on locations which are sustainable or capable of being sustainable. Oakford Fitzpaine is classed as a Tier 3 settlement or larger village, capable of providing sustainable development to meet its own and the housing needs of the wider community. Sadly, I think that status is out of date. Facilities in the village have declined, and whilst it is still a lovely place to live, it has no school, no doctor's surgery, little or no employment, and unreliable public transport. Oakford Fitzpaine is a dormitory village. It looks outwards for its educational, employment and welfare needs. In planning terms, it is not a sustainable community. We are kidding ourselves if we think by building new homes in this place that will change. The school won't reopen, a new doctor's surgery won't be built, and businesses are more likely to locate in towns which are more commercially favourable. I have challenged this Tier 3 status, but Oakford Fitzpaine is still growing faster than the rest of Dorset, and that is unlikely to change, but this is not sustainable. The question I ask is, what is the cumulative effect of development on this scale in this village? At what stage will the tipping point be reached? Will it be the extra 12,000 car journeys per week if development goes ahead? Or the impact of doubling the size of this village if the houses proposed in this application and the local plan go ahead? Or will it be the internal impact on the landscape? Large-scale development of this type should take place in proximity to settlements where the infrastructure already exists or is capable of being developed further. in communities where people can live, work and educate their children. This parish council and this community are not a bunch of NIMBYs. They do not
30 seconds left.
They do not oppose or object to every application. They are concerned about the effect of inappropriate development on their community. They are important stakeholders in the planning process and do not want to leave site selection to landowners and development. They have reached out to Dorset Council and I think it is unacceptable they have not responded to them. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you very much. Could you press the button, please? Thank you. Okay, we now go on to questions from members. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the table, okay, ask you questions, and then we'll go into comments and the debate. Can I please start with Councillor Cooper?
Thank you. Barry from One North. Yeah. My first question is to the officer. You said about the serious supply of housing needs. Well, in recent years, there's been the wet dairy site, Kingston Lane, where the poultry houses were, the old brickyard. All those have been developed have been approved in the last few years. So how do you say there's a serious supply of housing needs?
That was in the context of a 5-year housing land supply. We've got so 2.53. There's a serious for housing across the Dorset Council area, not just specifically this main. That's what I'm
Okay, so it's not specific to this village. Another question is, you talk about the viability of the village. How is this going to help with the viability of the village?
Yeah, we should. I mentioned in particular, in terms of by having housing there, you are supporting the services and facilities that are there at the moment. So, and contribution to the financial contribution.
So, what services are will you be contributing to the village, and they're already there? But there's no school, there's no village shop.
Yeah, go back to the slide that shows what. Yeah. I think yes, accepted. I think there's no denying from even the applicant that the house was lost, but the school relatively big close. GP service good one day from where. But yeah, there's and what the capacity you've got, there's a shop there, well, I think it is up for sale, but it is still open. The church, village hall, recreation ground, there's a garage repair, pub, and recreation ground there.
Yes, and please.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the question. I think we've explained in the context of the village what facilities it has. I think we'll have to look at this in the context of the development has to be made acceptable in its own right in terms of the impacts it would create. So if you have a look at page 33 of the agenda, the Section 106 contributions set out. So this development would secure through the Section 106 agreement at least 40% on-site affordable housing, and that's in line with our housing Mabian team's requirement for affordable housing set out in the report. It will provide NHS infrastructure contributions of £722 per dwelling. It will provide contributions towards education, so that was raised in the representations. So there would be a requirement per dwelling of an education contribution towards primary education. So that ensures that the local school, which is Shillestone School, has contributions towards it, and that's set out in the report. Also a STEM education contribution, which is also set out a preschool contribution, contributions towards the village facilities, so community leisure and sports facilities, which is £6.97 per dwelling. The formal open space, destination play, the LAP which is the local area of play and its maintenance, formal outdoor sports facilities contribution, rights of way contributions, a library contribution, and the monitoring fee. So in terms of looking at this planning application, it's not going to produce a significant amount of extra facilities for the village, but it does ensure that the existing facilities are provided for within contributions, and its impacts in terms of the impact it put on education and other infrastructure are properly mitigated through that requirement. So you need to look at that in the context of this. And in terms of housing need, there is a significant housing need in the whole area. We're not looking at this as an exception site so that every dwelling has to cater for the needs of the village. We're looking more broadly at the context of a significant lack of private housing supply and how the policies, our social policies in this context are out of date. So I hope that's helpful, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cooper.
I'll comment on that later on, but the final question is, you said about improved village connectivity. What do you mean by that?
So that is in terms of the, so on the screen here, you've got this pavements around the village. So if you're living in Coventry, you walk on the wheel on pavements to all of those services and facilities in the village. The proposal would have a link through to Harwick, so there'd be a connection point through to it, and then there'd be a path run through the site, which would then cross over Castle Lane at the northern end to the recreation grounds. You've got a new link there through the site, connecting recreation grounds to the rest of the village.
Just not. So if development wasn't there, there won't be any need to improve village connectivity.
Well, if you would have to work, I think I explained before, you'd have, if you were living in Cobble, for example, and you wanted to walk to the recreation ground, you was mentioned in the objections, well, you'd have to walk in a carriageway in Castle Lane to get to the recreation ground. It's obviously not safe, so this proposal would avoid that by going through the side off road and over the crossing road the crossing.
Right, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Apothecary.
Thank you, Chairman. Apothecary, Gilling Ward. My question really very similar to my colleague here. I'm very concerned about education, primary school education, especially given the proposal of 40% affordable. That will guarantee an influx of youngsters, I would presume. I would like to see an existing primary school that's thriving with plenty of room to take more students than trying to do catch up because the 106 agreement from book houses. So I'm really concerned about that, and I'm presuming that this is the question, I suppose, that we can't just suddenly reopen the primary school as is. But you just confirmed that that's not possible. Thank you.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, there aren't any plans to do that aggressively. My understanding is the primary school in village merged with Shillingstone, and it's within the catchment of that Shillingstone primary school, so any children and if they would or could go to the Shillingstone primary school going forward. The building's still there, so could potentially be capable, but that proposal for that, it's we could speculate that it could be as then. Okay.
Could I just come back to them? Thank you. So we've got a possibility of 150 youngsters coming on stream, and absolutely nowhere for them to go in their own village. And that doesn't sound very sustainable to me, actually. I think I'm also concerned about the lack of medical facilities and no surgery for village that size and growing at the rate that's grown. So that's also part of the sustainability argument. I understand that 106 money has been allocated, but it's still, well, we all know, haven't we, that they start building and you don't really get the 106 till they finish building, and by which time you've got 6-year-olds there not being able to access the local school, and the parents not being able to go and see their local GP. So I am concerned about those two things, and I'll leave it there for the minute. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jespers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Sherry Jespers from the Hill Courts and Upper Towns Ward. I've got a number of questions, if I may. The first one, I'd just like to go back to the improved village connectivity. As I understand it, what we're saying here is that what you're calling improved village connectivity only involves improving the access from the people from the 27 houses in Castlewick to get to the play area where they would otherwise have to cross the road. The residents in the new 78 new homes will have to walk on the narrow roads to reach any other part of the village. There's no proof of what is the connectivity for this new development.
Yeah, no, so they would need to be walking on the roads now. So on the screen there, you've got green, hopefully you can make that a green one. That shows the pavements at the moment in the village. So you can walk from Conwick into the village via pavements, not on the road. There is an option there to look what the village has to offer.
Which is very little.
You would then have a connection point from Conwick into the proposed development. Within the development, you've then got pavements and a path running through the public open space side of the site that's the most direct route, which will then be crossing point over Castle Lane to the recreation ground. You're effectively bridging that gap along Castle Lane, which is sort of cut off at the moment from the village to the recreation ground as a safe off-road route. Does that answer?
It answers. I have to say, I find that frankly stretching the meaning of improved village connectivity quite a lot, because it's not improved for the connection to the village. It's improved within the development that it is being built. But thank you for clarifying that. Can I ask about the bus service? How many buses a day go from within Oakford Fitzpaine, and where do they go?
The number, I think it's I don't know the exact number. It's not. I think it's every couple of hours from recollection. The route goes from Yeovil to Blandford, so it goes through Stemson.
Yeah.
So it sort of goes through Stemson, Newton, up eventually up to Yeovil. You'd be able to go down to Blandford.
Okay. Would it be reasonable to say that this is not a bus service that people could rely on to get to work every day?
It runs between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. So depending on your hours of work, I think it's reliable.
Providing you worked in Blandford.
Providing you work in Blandford or Yeovil.
Yeah.
It's just that we talk about bus services, and I know that there are people on this committee who live in towns who have perhaps a different understanding of what a bus service in the village is actually like, and I wouldn't want us to overestimate the contribution that the local bus service makes to the economic viability. The key question here, the matter that we're all going to come back to, I think, in our discussion, is the question of the sustainability of this village. And the other point is the number of houses that we're expecting this village to take. So my question on the sustainability of this village is, this village was designated as a tier 3 village back in, was it 2016 or 15 or whatever, when North Dorset wrote its local plan. And the case is clearly being made by the parish council and by anybody who knows the village that it no longer meets the criteria to be called a tier 3 village. It no longer has the facilities that meet that definition. And indeed, I think we should be aware that the parish council did challenge its status as a tier 3 village in its response to the draft local plan. So they're not just saying this now in the context of this development. That challenge had already been made. So I think my first question is on this is, how do we justify calling this a sustainable village to take this level of development just on the basis of the fact that it used to be sustainable, because the view is that it is no longer a tier 3 village. And if it was not a tier 3 village, we wouldn't be expecting it to take this level of development because it would be covered by countryside policies. Now, there has to be somewhere between those two positions that is more comfortable than perhaps what we're facing. So could we have some comment from officers about how you characterise this now as a tier 3 village in its current status? The facility that it now has, not what it once had.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think the place we are now is that it is in our spatial strategy as a tier 3 village. I understand that there may have been concerns at the time it was allocated, and I understand that over time services have changed, which is similar to quite a lot of settlements that we have around in our rural areas, that potentially pubs are closed and things change from that position. I think in terms of how inspectors have been addressing this issue, we have had a recent appeal in Oakford Fitzpaine, where the inspector did look at these issues and basically says that firstly, housing numbers are not an upper limit, and the scheme would contribute to affordable housing and other needs within the village and the wider area. So I think that's really important to note that in terms of we've had various appeals about this, in terms of has an upper limit been reached for this settlement, it's quite difficult to appeal unless there's some harm to clearly identify that upper limits have been reached. In terms of what the inspector found in the appeal, which was actually a slightly more central site than this, at Playdale's Farm, the inspector said that the framework, can you go up? Sorry. So the inspector talks about the fact that it is contrary to the spatial strategy because although it's an area that's identified for further growth, it's outside the settlement boundary like this slide was as well. It's not one of the exceptions to policy that you'd normally accept there. But in the context of the village, and I think it's the same for this slide, the properties would not be isolated homes in the context of the framework. Sorry. And furthermore, there's not an upper limit basically in terms of housing numbers. The inspector then goes on to look at the fact that as the site's located outside of the settlement, it doesn't meet any of the definition that you would normally allow in the countryside. You have to then go on to look at whether the site would be acceptable. And the framework recognises that opportunities to maximise sustainable transport solutions vary between urban and rural settlements, and I think that's quite key. So we're not sitting here saying to you that this settlement has every facility. It doesn't have a school anymore. It doesn't have doctor's surgery. That on its own doesn't necessarily mean that it's not an acceptable location for development when you look at our spatial strategy and what it's trying to achieve. So the inspector basically in that case concluded that the settlement was an appropriate location for additional development. So I think on this slide, if we're looking to say there's a complete issue with our spatial hierarchy in the context of the significant housing need we have, I would be concerned at appeal whether we could fully justify that position in the context of what strategy we have, the fact the strategy is out of date. So we have to look at opportunities outside of settlement boundaries to meet the significant need. And that is going to include development on the edge of larger villages, towns, that fit within the social hierarchy that we already have. And we found that in appeal decisions around Wolverton recently, where it doesn't have every facility. It does have a small doctor's surgery there, so it's slightly different. It's a very elongated settlement that probably has potentially poorer connectivity. So it's definitely something we have to consider in the balance. But in terms of there being strong reasons for refusal, as Rob set out in his report, in the context of our land supply and the facilities this settlement has, officers' conclusion is that would be difficult. But they are material considerations you have to weigh in the balance when you're looking at your overall decision based on what we set out and the evidence we would have if you were to have to declare the appeal.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank
you. That's really helpful advice. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Mrs. Smith, because that's really helpful, because I think we need to understand. And I think what you said is that it's a material consideration. We do have to consider it, but the opposite view is it's not very strong as it stands. Which brings me on to the next part of my question for advice about what levers we've got here, and that is the cumulative impact. Now, we've talked in the past in this committee about cumulative impact, and I understand that it's not one of our strongest levers ever. But could you explain to us a little bit about what we can do, what weight we can give to cumulative impact? Because I do think in the application we've got before us, it's not just, in my view, it's not just what the inspector discussed in that appeal, which was that development in the middle of the village. We're now looking at a series of developments, and there must come a point when the cumulative impact of that amount of development changes the weight somewhat. So could you talk us through that a bit? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry,
thank you for the question.
Turning into a really seminar. Yes.
I would love to cite an example where we've been successful in arguing that cumulative impact has been reached and it's harmful. I mean, there's been cases where we've argued that in different contexts, but around Stallbridge, for example, that had a lot of developments outside of its settlement boundary, the land supply issues. I think that all the inspectors, when they've grappled with that, have said there's not an upper limit and this development has not reached that limit. That said, obviously there's going to be some limit somewhere in terms of if you develop a settlement of this size to a certain extent, there would be, potentially eventually carrot and other palms that you would cite in combination with that. And I know through the new plan, we're looking at potentially a policy around smaller sites around settlements, but we're not in that context where we have that policy now. So we're looking at our existing spatial strategy, we're looking at it having very limited weight, and we're looking at having to look outside of those settlements that are not perfect in terms of their sustainability. I completely understand the concerns, because obviously the school being open would be a massive benefit, and children do have to get buses to the primary school, which is not that far away, but obviously not ideal. But there has been provision since the old school closed. I don't think there's much prospect of that school opening, because it has had permission to turn to a house. I don't think that's going to happen, and that isn't something that's before you now. It is a very difficult context with our land supply, but as officers, I think we have to advise in terms of where we feel there are strong reasons that we could follow through to appeal, and we're really looking around requiring, in relation to the tilted balance, a strong footnote reason, which we don't have here. We don't have a strong footnote reason in terms of the adjacent listed building, because we have less than substantial harm at the lower end, which Rob has very well explained in terms of being outweighed by the public benefits. We don't have any other localised harm in terms of specifically, thank you, Rob, his useful diagram here with the scales. And I think that's when we're looking at it. I completely understand where the comments have been raised by the locals, and it's very informative. And understand they live there, they understand the issues, but this is what we're looking at in terms of the context of the planning balance here. Yeah, so in terms of going back to the tipping point, in terms of too much development, I think we would be saying that it hasn't been reached in this case, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Carol Jones, Stonminster Newton. I know this area very well. I don't know whether you can answer this, but is it true that the affordable housing has been slow to take up in Shillingstone Fields? Do we know if that's true and why that is?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not aware of any particular issues. I know the adjacent site's been completed in full, which is 27 dwellings next door to the site. There was a site which was partially built on the old chicken sheds, which I think has slightly more to be constructed potentially on it. I think units have been selling there, so not aware of a significant amount of dwellings that have been sold and not have been built, sorry, not sold or occupied. But again, that would not be a reason to with our land supply situation, wouldn't be a reason that we could defend in terms of not granting more permissions.
Okay, I've got a couple more, please. There's a mention in here about apartments without a lift. How many stories is the apartments, please?
Just two.
Yeah. So lifts are not necessary then, presumably, with just 2 stories. Okay. There's also mention of a query whether there'll be a lot of noise with 74 heat pumps fairly close to each other. Has that been mitigated at all?
They go through internal, so there were questions asked at the end about any external associated with except so it's all just internal, so no associated.
Right, okay. Do you know what the current pupil numbers are at Shillingstone Primary and what the maximum capacity is at all?
Don't know, they didn't contact on education colleagues, so
can we have a little Google of that to see what capacity there is? I know there's capacity at William Barnes, which is 3.1 miles away, but Shillingstone is 2.3 miles. It's not walkable for children. It simply isn't. There's no pavements there. My final sort of question really is, if this application goes through, is there any way we can put a notification to our housing enabling team? Because this site is not suitable if you don't have a car. And I will tell you the pressures it puts on charities to help, especially single parents, children with food, with ancillary services and so on. It's impossible to get. I mean, the main town really would be Stonminster for services with citizens' advice, affordable food and so on. And it's just simply not possible. And the charities that I'm involved with already service people in Cumberwick without a car. And it puts a lot of pressure on charities, but it's just not right that we place people, vulnerable people, in affordable housing when they don't have a car. And I don't know if we can actually make that a condition in any shape or form. I'm not sure. They must have a car. They must have a car.
But there will be spaces to each person.
Yeah, but if they haven't got a car, that's fine. If they have a car.
There is space for this cycle division if people want to cycle. There is bus routes, so there are options.
Okay, I'll come back under comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brenton.
Thank you. Councillor Brenton, Litchfield Johnson. I've been fighting, I've been on committees recently where we've got planning applications for considerable numbers of houses, which could sort of topple a village into a different style village, shall we put it that way? And so my questions are more, I agree with what most of my colleagues have been arguing, but I won't argue the same one. Right. Cumberwick was outside the settlement boundary, so we've given permission for sites outside the settlement. Settlement boundaries are probably going to be changed gradually. condition did they get that? Was it because it was 100% affordable? That'd be the first question. This is just a question. I'm not making a political point. Are the roads on this proposed roads on this settlement, are they adopted by, going to be adopted by highways, which cost, or are they wide enough? And how is it supposedly being managed? You know, is it going to be a managed? You've got open areas at the top, which obviously need a management plan. So there will be some sort of management company overwhelming the site. I just wondered about that one. There's 144 car space. Now, that seems perfectly reasonable for 78 houses, except in my knowledge, people tend not to have 2 cars these days. They tend to have grown-up children who can't move out, so therefore they have 3 cars. And in one of my nearby affordable housing, social housing house, there are 7 cars because they've got 3 grown-up children. They've got 2 grown-up children, both with a car, and a living girlfriend with a car. And this was an affordable home because they couldn't find anything else that they could live in. We are pushed by these homes are not aimed at people in the near area. They are aimed at hitting Dorset's overall target.
Yeah. Yes.
So the overall target for Dorset is massive. We know that. We've been fighting that one. But as a result, we may have people who work in Yeovil, Bournemouth, Weymouth. They don't need to live in Oakford-Fitz-Plain. They could live anywhere. They could find a house. So we have to bear in mind that we are chasing a governor figure rather than a local need.
Yes.
And that is irritating. Next question, moving. So that's my argument about that bit. Road safety, we are all used to, well, for some of us are used to living in villages with narrow lanes, which have never had a pavement because the hedge is too near. You couldn't do it. So we are talking about introducing people who might come from anywhere into a village where they have to bumble along narrow lanes with tractors coming past, and they are, it's lovely to say, oh, we need a hard pavement between the play area and the centre of the village. I totally agree. But knowing Dorset's budget, we ain't going to get pavements or verges that you can walk on in anywhere where the hedges are already narrow. So is there any commitment from highways to improve the accessibility as opposed to just inside the development itself? I doubt it, but I'm asking. Okay, right. Next question. These are small houses. Lovely. But these are actually very small houses. Even the 4-bedroom house, which technically is supposed to cope with 6 persons, is only 124 square metres. That is barely over the minimum floor area expected. Affordable houses, which we have just allowed in one of my villages, gives 20 square metres more than that. And the 2-bedroom houses, 2-bedroom, are 71 square metres. Usually they're about 76 square metres. Now, it may not mean much, but it does mean that your 2nd bedroom could be, I could just get a single bed, or I could get 2 mature beds in. Or do we have to go into bunks because that's all they've got? The other thing that comes from the size of the house is that the residents will want to expand out. So do they have permitted development rights for conservatories, for large front porches, for all those sort of ancillary growth things that happen when you've got a very small house? So the question is permitted development and how it goes, because I could just see this site, if it goes through, as being, within a couple of years, you're going to have a rash of conservatories and this, that, and the other, because people have to live. If not,
a caravan in the back garden for a teenage son. You know, you can get urban clutter in a village situation, and that comes under the other bit of, is this style appropriate to the village? Now, there's a lot of comments from the design team about unsympathetic. You could argue, and I would if I had more time, argue that, should we say, the designs are pretty pedestrian. They're not exactly, they don't have much change in roof styles, in building styles. In the village, because they've been grown over hundreds of years, you have a lot of different sorts of shapes and sizes. This is an urban housing estate. And I just wonder how much weight we can put onto the design codes and the design officers' comments about unsympathetic materials, too much red brick, too much red roof, all of which will be seen from a distance. The layout is, yeah, I know it fits modern standards and all that, but it is in a village. And we're talking about making the village more fit. So I wonder how much weight we can put onto that. Okay, when you get back to your balance, there's a couple of things I like to knock off. Yeah. We might make it more method, should we say? Okay, right. Acceptable design and visual impact query. Local expenditure query, because they're going to get into a car and go and buy everything in Sturmiston Newton, which is fine, but it won't be in the video shop. Construction jobs and supply chain, fine, but that's an end to it. Financial, I'll forget the others. Improved village connectivity, my colleagues have been going on about that. Switch to the middle. No harm to biodiversity. No highway safety issues. So I just wonder how much we should take into account the balance.
Right, well, here.
Thank you. Would you like to go ahead and answer those questions?
Or do you need to lie down?
I think I can't know if I've missed anything. The first point was the we'll go back to the layout. That would be great. Yeah, thank you. So the first question was the development adjacent Conwick is actually outside the settlement boundary. Was that granted on the basis of being an exception site or not? And the answer is no, it was granted because we had a land supply situation issue at that point, previous to the APS position. And it was granted because of our requirement for extra housing and the need to look outside of the settlement boundary because of the reduced rate to the station strategy.
Okay, right.
So similar consideration to this site. So the next question was around highway adoption. So the Highway Authority have commented on this scheme and raised no objection. The carriageway is designed to adoptable standards. So it could be offered for adoption. So we can't insist on that. But if the developer was to offer it, it's up to adoptable standards apart from the small private parking areas, which there are not many of them, but there's a couple of parking pools, which wouldn't be offered for adoption if the developer wanted to do so. The next question was on road safety. Introducing people into an area where there's no pavements and they may not be used to that. And are there any highway schemes that you need to be aware of for making the settlement more sustainable rural? And the answer is no, we're not aware of any those schemes. Next question is about minimum space standards. So take the point that they're not.
Could we just
We need to stop
adjourn
sorry.
for 5 minutes?
I take up too much time, sorry.
No,
Or is it just
Okay, we're all back again, so I think we can reconvene and start again. So would you like to, if you've got anything else to say?
Thank you, Jeff. It's just on the minimum space standards point. It's not actually contained in the policy for the North Dorset local plan, but it is national guidance. And I understand the point about it doesn't greatly exceed the standard, but it does meet it. So I feel like sometimes we have developments more likely private, when it's not affordable housing, we have not quite meeting the standards, and we probably have to take a balance view. But this scheme does meet the space standards, so I think in terms of an area of concern, we wouldn't have anything to raise there of substance, unfortunately. But yeah, they're all designed in a way that meet that standard, and that standard is there to accommodate the number of people for that size of house satisfaction, including storage, and so it shouldn't be an issue in terms of living standards at all, as the team has met it. And then the second to last point was the style of the property. So Rob set out in his report that it's considered that it is an appropriate design approach based on the pattern of development found elsewhere in the village. The fact that it does provide strong landscaping to the frontage, which helps to safeguard to some extent the setting of the listed building. It also provides further landscaping to the rural edge. You can see that the existing edge that Conrick forms the countryside is quite a hard edge at present, but this scheme does provide good landscaping and a softer edge to the newly formed edge of the settlement here. In terms of, they are not modern buildings, so take the point they're not completely the same as some historic developments in the settlement, but they do use characteristic materials. So the brick and the other callus materials and the roof materials are characteristic. And they do include, they're not featureless dwellings, they do include chimneys, porches, lintel details that add interest in terms of appearance of the dwellings. They're not, it could be considered to be particularly land in their approach, but they do provide design features on them. And you can see the development next door takes a similar approach and does fit in with the village despite the hard edge fairly well. So yeah, I think the final point was to do, design codes. How much weight can we attach to those? None at present, we don't have the design codes in place. So we have policy 24 of the local plan, but officers haven't found a significant conflict with that policy in terms of what it sets out. It's not prescriptive. It talks about good design, not just what the building looks like, but good layouts, good amenity space, good open space, access to that open space, good landscaping, the general qualities of the scheme, and that's considered to be acceptable in this case. The last point was about the balancing, Chair, and Rob was going to comment on that, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. The council that bits in the middle are sort of neutral weight, so not in favour or against that. The answer clear from that, but those are just considerations which neither way in favour or against, but are more neutral. You said about some of those economic factors on the in favour local expenditure construction, those are often almost always cited in appeal decisions as economic benefits and way in so it's consistent with that in terms of those are risk benefits, which obviously it's ultimately down to the committee to decide which considerations should be considered in the balance.
Thank you. Okay. Chair, can I speak? It's a simple question, but I missed it out on my list. Okay, it says crossing points, pedestrian crossing from the entrance to the play area, and possibly one further down across Castle Lane, I think it is. Define pedestrian crossing. Are these zebra crossings, or are these just a bit of dropped curb on either side, basically inviting people to cross here, but not telling the cars that people will be crossing here? That's because that's an issue in several of these applications. Is the tactile paving, are the lines across, or do we not know yet?
I think from those plans, you can to make that there are tactile paving, it would appear that the final details though put a condition on which is recommended to get the final details. So there does need to be sort of Copenhagen style or raised tables or tactile paving on curbs, zebra crossing, etc. We can look at that as a final condition. But from what we've got, it appears there would be tactile paving on curbs. Yeah, no objections from our authority on any of those ones. Do you want to see the other?
Is this inside the 30 mile an hour limit?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, visibility space in the baseline, 30 mile an hour speed in the measure which is.
It's not
further on to traffic. Sorry, but we have that information as well. So I was check that indicated weight masters.
Yes.
Yeah, that's.
Oh, I've just found it. I found it.
So just indicate if you're accessing that, there's also.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Taylor, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Johnson, there is small. Going back to the application, I think I'd like to bring up that's no be right. The principal point which you've just mentioned, Councillor Edson, about the access point to the estate itself. Going opposite is the access to the play area. Now, to me, as we've just discovered, that there's 78 towers, probably about 200 cars, including size of us going in there. How does that protect the access to the play area coming out from the estate? Because to me, that's quite dangerous, what's going on. That's the first question, actually.
It's so quiet up there, I can't see that big.
This is the way you mean. That's yeah. Yeah, this was the frequency. I mean, in terms of the cars, do you mean the cars coming in and out of the recreation?
Yeah, basically the transport, or the transport. The people coming out, the play area, coming up and down the road, the 30 mile an hour limit. There's a lot of activity going on in that. Sorry.
Yeah.
There's a lot of activity going on in that area. So how is it playing? To me, there's no safety aspects. For example, like school times, morning service, office hours, you name it. There's traffic coming in and out all the time. So therefore, how is the access to the play area being protected for the children and adults going in and out of it? Certainly they are.
Well, yeah, if I were going to have been consulted, they were consulted on all these sort of matters and did raise any objection about the safety of this particular crossing point. Again, we've got a condition on just to the final details, just to see if there's any other potential mitigation which could factor that in.
You want to raise conditional or we raise conditional?
No, there is one proposed, recommended.
Okay,
fine. Details for this crossing point. So that's something that could be to after.
Right, okay, so additional team anywhere. Coming back onto the application supplements for the area concerned, can you go back to your overall plan of the buildings where it's all got green bits?
The elevation.
Yeah.
That one?
No, the actual overall plan of the
site plan.
Yes, I think
that one.
Yeah, correct. Two concerns there, which is coming into proceedings, perhaps the flow of water, as in the rainfall, drainage, etc. I know the elevation of drainage is going down towards the containment plant, containment basin, which is down there. But is it adequate, actually, the amount of water runoff for the actual road coming onto the tarmac, the concrete pavements, etc., etc.? And I'm also going to ask the question: is there a possibility of the construction of the pathways from overlays being actually soaked away? Because we're trying to move to that area where it's actually contained into the area and not just creating a complete slipstream down to the drainage tank or basin. Is there a condition that they can include?
Is that plan that's the drainage strategy?
Yeah.
So there's some red arrows on it, which kind of shows the direction of that's overlap, shows everything flowing on the roads. Will all be gently flowing into the south facing west corner or into the public open space on the east side of this one.
Yeah, back to your plan, your showing of water, the floodplain water that's going on. There's two subjects you can put down. I think it's 24 water runoff, 24, 39.
Slide.
It was a showing of the water where it settles in the road, etc. You've shown flood actually. Two versions, you had one of the some period today.
Was it the? I'm not sure exactly what did you make note.
It's in, yeah, so I've got 24 and 39, but we haven't completed your class.
Yeah, that's it. For that's 24.
Yeah, well, that's one of the plans I'm sort of looking at. It's actually the actual coming out the exit from the estate. Down there, the virtually is a small stream going down the road. So therefore, there's obviously water problems there. So therefore, the runoff is that going to create more of a problem with road being just a permanent river or waterway?
You never get flooded.
That's the thing. And you look on your flood overall flood overpass, the road shows that there's runoff and settlement for various waters. It's a blue one. Sorry.
Oh, that's a plan.
Thank you.
So
yeah, that's it. You can see on there of the flood zone plan of the second one, the bottom right there, there's a lot of water around that. And there's also a lot of water across the play area. So that means to say where the drainage basins be put on the other side, which is there, there's nothing much being taken care of regarding the water runoff and where it's going to. So therefore, I've asked the question back to the flood plan, basically, because I don't think it's working.
It doesn't flood there.
And you've arrowed it to say in that previous overall plan was actually area showing it going down towards that road area. So it's creating a problem of water retention and no water runoff.
Just to show thank you. Strategy, yeah. So the local authority have been consulted on the application before. Actually, we did have an amended strategy submitted, and they initially they often have a holding objection if they don't have enough information to satisfy their guidance and expectations, but they have withdrawn that following these further submissions. So they're happy with the effect, and then there wouldn't be any serious flooding issues as a result of
which we just had.
I think most places probably did have issues. So
part of the process is to go back to the lead local.
Yes, yeah, but there's also a condition recommended for a finalised drainage strategy. So this, so if there's any little tweaks building on this.
So does this kind of affect our way of granting this application today, or do we have to have these conditions in place before we actually make approval? That's my question.
Sorry.
Do we have to have the approval in place before we actually go forward?
Thank you, Chair. The lead local flood authority looked to ensure that the development stays for its lifetime and it doesn't make flooding worse elsewhere. And through that self drainage strategy, where you can see the attenuation pond and the other drainage infrastructure, that's what the LFA are looking for, and they have confirmed that this strategy, subject to the pre-commencement condition, would ensure that the development stays for its lifetime and it wouldn't make flooding worse elsewhere. Having regards to the flood constraints around the site.
So coming back to that, sorry, thank you, Hannah. That means that the conditions have to be enforced before the application goes through. Is that right?
They've had sufficient details at the application stage to be able to move to a pre-commencement condition. So the pre-commencement condition says prior to development on the site that the detailed drainage strategy and all the details must be submitted for approval in writing, and the lead local flood authority would comment on that then. But they've had sufficient details, a lot of details you can see in the drainage strategy, to be satisfied that that scheme can be worked up and can be then discharged from the pre-commencement planning condition. And that's what we normally look for on sites like this. There's sufficient detail at this stage. We know the strategy, and then any finer details will be provided through the pre-commencement condition, and the LFA will comment again on that before it's completely discharged. So yes, it has been looked at thoroughly in that respect.
Thank you. So that means that there's a condition going in place that won't break the ground. Is that right? Yep.
Yeah, this condition.
That was 3. Okay. Coming back onto the tree, the one by the cottage, by the way, that hasn't got a TPO on it. Whereas the one on by the generation tank has. Do we have a condition on that? Because that was quite a long tree. It's the one by the cottage.
I think that's this one, isn't it? Yeah. So this tree.
That one. Yes.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think it does have a TPO on it. It's within the curtilage of the listed building. It's the open space in the sun, so there's no plans to have any construction activity here as far as I'm aware. There's a condition about construction traffic management plan where we look at where any welfare of the compound area for construction traffic would be going, so we ensure that it's very near route protection area. With this plan, but there is actually a protected fencing around the street proposed as well. So I think it's that as well. Tree officers looked at it as well. Not wasting the issue with that particular tree. So I think we've got enough information to indicate that tree would be
raising all on it.
So
can we raise all on it to protect it? TPO?
It's in the curtilage of the.
I mean, they usually, when from my experience, when we get a site come in, the tree officer will look at trees of that within that red line and whether they're worthy of TPO, because this one's outside. That's possibly why they didn't look at this tree, put a TPO on it.
But my question is, can we raise something to protect it?
Yeah, I mean,
that's a condition.
Yes, sure, yes.
Yeah, we can have tree protection. Yeah, there is
half a tree.
Yeah, tree protection.
Okay, so I'm going to come back again to the attenuation tank itself. Now, it's in the area of lots of children. Does it have protection?
No.
Safety?
Yeah, we've addressed this.
Yeah, it's a good query. We go out the applicant, just check whether it doesn't. Was informed that it
doesn't have. I haven't seen many people put in post on that.
Because of the
quantitative meets need, so that's quite dangerous to children.
Yeah, because of the slope of it, I think we've got the section on there. Of course, the guidance is no requirement to have a protective fencing around there or sort of like rings very life saving. But we control. There is potential to have some sort of barrier or boundary around there if deemed necessary as part of the hard landscape.
And sounds here saying, is there going to be or isn't there going to be? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, I think
dangerous children. I want to know that. So
yeah, I think regards to the guidance we've had, the information, the advice we've been given is that the subbasin of this profile would require
or would be imposed.
Trying to de-stress.
Would be imposed, but if deemed necessary, it could be imposed.
It would be necessary for the safety of children. That's what I'm trying to get at. So it's a very dangerous area.
Yeah, I think there is actually a hard landscape. It was proposed to. Yeah, so just doing the top here, this little brown line, that's like a knee rail, so quite low rail proposed there. Along that pathway, if members felt it was necessary to extend that, that could be more fine hard landscape.
Children are going to get in no matter what, if they find a gap, they'll go for it. So therefore, I would extend it to say that total protection area for the safety of the children. Absolutely.
That can form part of the hard landscape.
Thank you. And going back to connectivity, which a lot of people are raising here today, and I've been looking at it very carefully, saying that pathways are 1 person wide, the quotation was, on this. Is that enough for actually allowing people to be accessing different states in pathways? Because I don't think it is. And if you've got 1 person and 2 children, you ain't going to have much opportunity to actually control them or keep them off the pavement area. So what is going on with the pavements themselves? Are they wide enough to make sure people are safely walking down there with a view of safety of children, adults, etc. And also bridleways, but also mentioned as well, It's a all six actions here, links that. So therefore, it's an accessibility for people to move between, not just the estate, but also other villages as well. Going back to that, distance between villages is far too long for people with children to go across to school, which is in the other village. So therefore, this connectivity is a very dubious area for me, and it's not clear. So therefore, I want to know what has been given consideration of lack of pavements, lack of community connectivity, and the fact of safety as well. It's not stated, it's not clear enough. To me, it's just a path. Yeah, that means nothing to me. So therefore, what was in the email for us in the guidelines laid down by the commencement of building the estate, building the area, to make sure the connectivity is up to standard. And the standard, I think, is 2 metres or 1.5 metres. That's our standard pathway expenditure. So just a bit of clarity on that, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, the pavements within the site, again, have been looked at by officers, including the Highway Authority, and there's not been any objections raised. So I think those are deemed appropriate. The pathway running through the open space.
Connecting the two departments.
Yeah, absolutely. That's slightly wider, I think, as shown on that plan as well. And could potentially be made wider, subject to final part landscaping schemes.
You say no objections to that at all, but I don't hear anything from parish council to state whether there's objections there at all. Who are the objections that be coming from? From the developer, the builder, site layout guy, the old lady, sorry, not being sexist. So therefore, I'll look at it to say, has this been passed to be standard to make sure it's safe for pedestrians walking around the estate?
Yes, site is, yes.
Okay, and the connectivity between the other state, one state here, goes directly onto a road. Has that got pathways?
The connectivity through to other parts.
So there's one other state to the other.
Yeah.
As it shows to me, it's like a pathway that stops straight onto the road.
This are you talking about this connection point here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, there's a condition on about final details of this because the overlay is not quite married up there with where it is. But yeah, you can get final details. I'm sure there's an agreement with the joint plan that this can happen. So we can get some final details for that connection point just to ensure it's wide enough, it's level enough, it's got curves, tactile paving, etc., to cater for everyone, even those with protected characteristics.
I agree with the connectivity. It's just when we get to the other side, we end up in a road. Are there pathways leading away from it, even or in safety, without vehicles contacting them?
It cross over onto a pavement on the south side, on the south side here. So this is a pavement here, Carwick.
Right, so you're crossing the road for a tree area, a shrub area, which are going out straight onto a road, and then crossing the road to a pedestrian route going out. There is no conditions there to state, to tell people what to do.
Yeah, soft landscaping plans can ensure that there's adequate visibility. We can look at the species of trees, hedgerows, planted there, just to make sure there's warning lines, signage, essentially possible, yeah.
And also crossing warnings for people that like a line to say where a vehicle, whatever.
Yeah.
Because they are traveling 20 miles an hour, and then you've got commercial vehicles going around that, the rubbish vehicles, this and that. Don't watch out for these sort of things. So there may be a possibility of not looking. The big vehicles, as we all know.
Can we move on?
That was that one there. Let's pick up in real detail on that one there. Yeah, no, that's me. Okay.
Thank you. Can we move on to debate?
Thank you. I've just got one question myself, and again, it concerns connectivity. We've talked about pavements and things, but I'm thinking about connectivity between this village, Pittsburgh, and Shillingstone. Particularly from a pedestrian point of view, I believe it's 2.3 miles, and
can't do it.
Way too far anyway. But is there any?
No.
No, I think there's not along the road. I think there's a footpath network. I'm not sure if they.
No, there isn't. No.
Okay, thank you for that. Could I now ask Sherry Jasperson to make a point? I think we're making it. We're going to comment and debate.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Sherry Jasperson, Hillport, Town Ward. So we're into debate now. I think it's fair to say that we are all very uncomfortable about this development. Without the presumption in favour hanging over us like the sword of Damocles that it does, we could refuse because it's not in conformity with the spatial strategy. It's outside the settlement boundary. It's not a truly sustainable location. There is less than substantial harm, or there is less than substantial harm to a heritage asset, and there's considerable harm to the character of the village from this development. But of course, we do have the presumption in favour. But the point is, under the presumption in favour, our policies still apply. They don't vanish. They're still there. It's just that they carry less weight. So I'm looking for a defendable grounds to refuse this, which take into account specifically the cumulative impact of this quantum of development on both the sustainability and character. I feel that there ought to be grounds to refuse this quantum of development on grounds of the harm that it does to the character of the village, and on the grounds that it is not, in the view of the committee, a sustainable location for this quantum of development. So without wanting to preempt the rest of the discussion, what I'd like to do is propose that so that officers can now come back and shoot me down and tell me why a refusal on those grounds would not be defendable, because if it is remotely defendable, then I think that's the route the committee might want to go. So if Mrs. Smith now wants to tell me all the reasons why that won't work.
Thank you, Chair. It's completely right that the policies are still relevant. I think the issue is with the weighting, and as we've heard, we're not talking about a lot of weight that we can attach to our spatial strategy. It's very limited weight. I think Rob cited that, and that comes from other appeal decisions. And that, coupled with the fact that there's a significant shortfall of housing, makes the refusal based on just the spatial strategy difficult. And I think that's set out in Rob's report. In terms of character and appearance of the area, again, I think we need to look for a strong reason there. So as we've explained, there's not a footnote reason, or there's not a protected landscape reason, there's not a strong heritage reason. So we're left with the localised change in character, which will occur. So there will be a change in character on the edge of the village through the construction of these dwellings, there's no doubt about that. It's just whether we can robustly defend that position in terms of it being a strong reason when weighed against the housing land shortfall and the limited rate to our spatial strategy, and the measures that the applicants put in place through designing the development to have open space along the frontage, safeguards to some extent the setting of the listed building, although it will be less than substantially at the lower end, and also good landscaping through the site. I think that as officers we'd find it difficult to come up with strong reasons, but it is down to committee to decide that and to put the weight where you think is appropriate in terms of the planning balance. Yeah, thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
So if I could come back, thank you very much. So you say that there isn't a footnote grounds to refuse this, but there is less than substantial harm to the heritage asset, the castle cottage. Now I know that doesn't have much weight, but it's not no weight. So if we are going to refuse, I think that would be in there as one of our, adding a little bit more grist to our mill, because that there is a small objection. It just doesn't count because it's difficult to put that against 78 houses, but there is some weight there. And I do think that I mean, I would like us to pursue the character argument with the footnote argument that damage the heritage asset. On the basis of the cumulative of this quantum of development that the village is being. Now, I know there's no upper limit, I get that, and I know there's no that's not a robust argument in itself. But again, it's not nothing. What we're asking this village to accommodate is nearly doubling in size, and we ought, as a committee, to be able to take that into account in terms of harm to the character of the village and the character of the local area. So I think the cumulative impact ought to be relevant in terms of character impact. And so yes, that's where I would like to go with this. But I don't know if anybody wants to support that.
Thank you, Chair. The less than substantial harm is material, absolutely. So in terms of the context of the heritage assets, any harm to a heritage asset has to be given great weight. In this case, it's less than substantial harm at the lower end in terms of its impacts because of the context that Rob explained in terms of the significance of the asset and how the settings are partially eroded and how it would be safeguarded through the design and development. I think recently the NPPF has changed and the footnote reasons need to be strong reasons in their own right. So just the fact that there is a degree of less than substantial harm, we have 2 recent appeals on that position, where we had less than substantial harm to 2 farmhouses in a different village. It was less than substantial harm that we argued both cases, and in both cases it was fewer dwellings, but the inspector found that public benefits clearly outweigh that harm, did not support that position. So I would have to say that although there is harm, we have to take that seriously in terms of harm to any heritage asset. It's not a strong reason in terms of the amount of harm that would occur. And I think in terms of how it's been set out in Rob's report, how the developments responded to the assets to help safeguard what's important about its setting, we wouldn't have a strong footnote reason there in officer's view, but it's down to committee to decide on that point. But we have had recent experience of arguing. I know it's different context, you can't draw complete parallels, but it does indicate how inspectors are weighing with these issues when you have a degree of less than substantial harm, but fairly significant public benefits and a situation of land supply issues. And then, sorry, so the second point, sorry, Chair. Was
so that leaves us with character and sustainability.
Yes, there is a change in character through having the development here, but again, a degree of change is not necessarily a strong reason. And we've had various appeals where we've cited character and appearance issues, but just because the development goes further into the countryside, it's not necessarily enough on its own to have a robust refusal reason, but it will change the character of that area. But we'd have to demonstrate why that is harmful enough, weighed against the benefits of the scheme through affordable housing, and other general needs housing that's of course secured by the 106 agreement. So there will be a change of character, but we haven't been able to find a harm there that would justify a refusal based on the benefits that Rob set out in this report. And I would caution against this the sort of notion about an upper limit, because we have not been successful in that respect. And this is not considered to be completely uncharacteristic of the development. And I think if the argument cites around there's been a lot of development before, therefore this must be harmful also, that would be difficult to defend.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Well, I do not know what is happening. Okay, I have had a quick look at school capacity. Currently at Shillingstone, we have 2 spaces, 2. Now at William Barnes, we do have space. We've probably got about 35 spaces at William Barnes. However, so school transport is free for those under the age of 8 if the school is 2 miles away. So I just I really don't like the fact that we can't look at something holistically and say, okay, so basically everybody that's under the age of 8, you're going to get free transport to Shillingstone or to William Barnes. But if you're over 8, you won't get free transport. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to work. We're not looking at this holistically in any shape or form. And I know we say there's a shortage of housing, but there isn't a shortage of housing in Oakford Fitzpaine, or indeed in Sturminster, or even Shillingstone, because there are houses for sale that have been on the market for some time. And with regards to Section 106 monies, the problem here is that it's only available for capital. So yes, we need more doctors, but we can't use Section 106 to get a new doctor because that's revenue, that's not capital. And Sturminster Surgery doesn't need any more capital. In fact, Sturminster Surgery, which is probably where a lot of these people would go, that they're really, I mean, it's well organised, but they don't need capital. They actually need more doctors, and we can't spend Section 106 money how we want to. I don't know whether there's any case that we could make in trying to reduce the level 3 designation status of Oakford Fitzpaine, whether that would actually do anything or work in any shape or form. But if that was currently, as it stands, what frustrates me as being on a planning committee is that we're looking really at the fact that we can't refuse it. And actually, what the hell are we doing here, really, as a planning committee? If we can't refuse it and we haven't got the grounds to refuse it, why have we been sitting here for the last 2.5 hours talking about it, really? And it just frustrates me that we can't work collectively as a whole council and look at school transport, school places, affordable housing that is or isn't needed, cars needed by people that live in these areas. And we're just so split into silos of this is planning law and that's housing, so they don't really meet. And currently, as it stands, I really don't want to support this, but I don't know how we can refuse it. And I'm hoping my colleague here, Sherry, who's brilliant on these things, we can come up with something.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm going to the officers saying about Section 116 and contributions to, well, you've set out education and other things. That will not be spent actually in the village,
no.
But it'll be spent outside of the village. So it won't be, so that is the one thing, and then I'll go on to some.
Yeah, thank you.
Gotcha. It depends what contributions for. So if there are facilities in the village, such as the
education.
Oh, sorry, education. So the education contribution is for primary contributions that we spent on primary schools that this village feeds into. So it have to be used in association with a village school that benefits. So we only ask for contributions towards education when there's been identified that there's a requirement to provide that. Because in terms of mitigating the impacts of development, we unfortunately on this scheme we can't solve every infrastructure issue that might exist. What we have to make sure in terms of the skill tests in requiring contributions is that they mitigate and make acceptable the impacts of the development itself. So that's why this list set out in Roger's report identifies various contributions that need to be secured to ensure that those impacts that are generated by this development proportionately are mitigated. So some will be spent in the village if they're village facilities, some will be spent on the relevant educational facility. So I think that for education it's primary and STEM provision and free-to-talk provision. There's an amount put well in the scheme that have to provide for that.
Yeah, thanks for that. But if these properties were built somewhere else, you still build their property, isn't it, with the application? So what I'm trying to say is, you're saying that there's a contribution to a dwelling. If they weren't built here, but they were built somewhere else in Dorset, that there will still be a contribution. You see what I'm trying to say?
Absolutely, yes.
On
Thank
that
you, Chair. If they were built somewhere else,
Yeah.
it would depend on what the need was in that area. So if there wasn't a requirement for a primary or secondary or STEM contribution, we wouldn't require one. So we don't require contribution to education unless there's an identified need for contribution, because otherwise it would not be necessary to mitigate the impacts of the development. So some applications you see they make no primary contribution because there's sufficient space in the school. We don't have to require the developer to provide any contributions. So it does depend on the context of the site and what we need to require from the Section 06. Some are standard and we absolutely need to ask them the whole time. Some will depend on the situation in the area. So it's not a general pot for primary education. It's based on the development and its impacts.
Yeah, so you're really saying now that they need investment in schools in the area.
The
Primary.
contribution will ensure that the impacts of development are mitigated. But there is a requirement to provide primary places for children in this development. We can't on this scheme do any more than require the development to make sure they provide contributions towards that. How that then is spent is dealt with our education authority where the need arises. So we take contributions towards proportion because this development's never going to build a new primary school. It may have to contribute to educational requirements to meet that need. And our education team advise us when we need to seek contributions when we don't. But it has to be proportionate because developments put a particular impact on education. We have to request contributions that are proportionate to that impact.
Can I therefore turn to the site and that? Because other applications within Spain have been approved, like the website that was not there, Shillington Lane, that's where the borders were. Then there was a brickyard site. All those were brownfield sites, or I class them as brownfield, so they were agricultural land that was used for that, whereas this is in a greenfield site. And I think that is a very strong signal towards it. Can I go therefore to your balance? On balance there, talk about local expenditure. I think that's a very good case. Construction jobs, it's not going to be local construction jobs, they're going to be within Dorset.
Yeah.
Financial contribution, very limited. On-site play area, that's not very, doesn't look to me to be very, very adequate, really. Improved village connectivity, that is very weak, I believe. And if you look at Castle Lane, there's no pavements all up through there, right up to the village, right up to where the cross and all that is, where that is. There's no footpaths or footways either side of the road, right up through there. And people don't always walk through the estates to get somewhere. They take the shortest route. And, that's a great concern. So I just feel that there is a case to refuse it. So leave that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bothacray and then Councillor Brenton.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just really picking up on what my colleagues have said. Sherry was saying about the character and the change to the character. I was off there.
Yeah.
And I was wondering about the social change to the character, which has its implications, knock-on implications for things like primary schools, things like that. And even more important that we have pavements and things, when we've got little ones. So, putting that in the mix as a reason to be able to vote against it, would social change of character be acceptable as a bit of criticism of it? But the other thing, as Barry has just said about the Greenfield site, that the spatial strategy obviously comes in because it's outside of the village. And whether it's Greenfield or Brownfield doesn't seem to come into the spatial strategy in the same way. But the fact that it's a double hit, that it's a Greenfield site and it's outside the village, should add more weight to the spatial strategy, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Just one comment about the site in Brownfield that we haven't talked, not in Brownfield, the site. It would be nice to be able to accommodate all of the housing we have to deliver on Brownfield site, but that's not going to be possible. I know there have been some commercial sites that have been brought forward in the village, which have been redeveloped because they've had industrial uses or they've been in agricultural use and have big barns on it, and they have been built out. But to meet our housing requirements, it is going to necessitate greenfield sites being brought forward, and appeals we've lost recently have mainly been greenfield sites, and it's not going to weigh strongly in the planning balance, the fact that it's not brownfield.
Thank you. Councillor Brenton.
Thank you, Councillor Renton, Mission Housing. I agree with virtually everything you've been saying, apart from having to fence off a pond, because I think the whole joy of the growing up in the country is being able to get into ponds.
Exactly so. Exactly so.
It's 2 meters deep, but it's not going to be full of water, so I think it's good family in there, good fun. But the sort of people who will be moving into these houses won't be the sort of people who were brought up paddling around footpaths and jumping into ponds. So my issue is more to do with if you look up there, acceptable design, visual impact, I can see that from the road it won't push it round. There's plenty of mature trees around it. That puts settle in. From a distance, it will make the village look much larger, and it will definitely be different. I will get drawn to that from a distance. So visual impact is a bit half and half. But acceptable design for this site, I would query, because we know that people who live in the country do tend to collect clutter. We're not tidy people like in town. We have bikes, we have children's bikes, we have another bike, we have wheelbarrows, we have compost heaps, we have all sorts of things. And you've got very small houses, so all that outside stuff is going to have to be in sheds and conservatories and stuff. And I don't think this site sort of really works with that idea. So I'm beginning to wonder about the design itself. Probably, it's not terrible. In another place, it will be fine. But we are talking about the cumulative effect of not exactly the right design, in not exactly the right place, in not exactly the right village, in not exactly improving village connectivity. So it isn't just, what's the phrase that we've been talking about, overwhelming of the village in numbers. It's an accumulation of queries. The bit I really don't like is because we know that this site will be basically pitched at all of Dorset. Come and buy a house here. Come and live here because that's the only place we can put you in, because we haven't got any other affordable houses we can put you in. So there will be a push from outside. These people aren't used to walking along narrow lanes. I think the road safety issue of crossing, if it was a zebra crossing, people would complain about the lights flashing all night. But if you don't have that, you'll basically say, cross here, the cars won't care, which is a bit scary. So I don't like the sort of not giving clear, we are definitely going to have a zebra crossing, bright yellow stripes, warning signs, things like that. It's a bit vague. The other thing that gets me is this safe route to school. Having been on schools transport, that is distinctly not a safe route to school. We may allow an 11-year-old to walk it, but even you know, 9-10-year-olds walking down that road in the morning to get to Shillingstone and then to catch the bus, or waiting, hanging around the street corners waiting for buses. And remember, all those small buses cost Dorset Council quite a lot of money. So, you know, we are putting in a site that we're then going to have to subsidise with school bus transport, because you can't expect everybody to walk 3 miles, however lovely Somerton is. So I'm working, there's not one thing that kills it, but there's an accumulation of things. And I'm very sorry, officers, but we're going to have to sort of work it into some sort of answer. And I don't know if the accumulation of negatives is a good reason to oppose. One of them wouldn't be a problem, but 6 or 7 negatives.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Taylor, please.
Yeah, actually, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Thank you. Actually, what's in the back on my list, skies policy. Do you have anything on this regarding the application? Please, dark skies.
No, it's not Rambo Chase, National Landscapes or Dark Skies.
But I think there's Nancy put on there to keep down lighting the bats. There's a big light plants. Yeah.
Are there street lights?
Yeah.
No, it's not it. That's not going to be lamp posts. It representing street lights. It's low level. It can't be the rest of them.
I noticed on the application as well, there's no roof lights anywhere, no roof windows. Is that going to be a condition for not having roof lights and windows?
We don't need to.
No, it's not proposed to be.
No, you don't need to.
It's just front elevation, so it's not rear elevation. But as far as I remember, there's no heat rugs supposed to be removed. So
None.
They would, so we would have to make the development to extend that sort of integration. Yes. Yeah.
And sorry, Chair, it is noted that the roof heights are relatively high, so it's feasible that one can put in a lodge.
Exactly.
Well, I don't see that being a problem.
They can't.
So what's that?
They can do it, not.
Yeah, they can do. Yeah.
And coming back to us, we're all saying 7 years, we're desperately scrapping, trying to work out where traffic make this go forward. Stop it there, because the sea Councillor Jefferson can chair.
She gets that to
it. Holding on.
Okay, thank you. Question Button.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're having a heated agreement here, aren't we? So what I need to do is put this to the test now. So I would like to propose some grounds to refuse.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to second them, then we will go into a little adjournment and officers will see if they can put any sufficient meat on it. And then on the basis of officers' views when they've had a little go, we can then vote on it, because I don't want to propose grounds for refusal that are so slight that we lose in it appeal. But I do feel we have to have a go here, because there's such strong opposition to it. So the grounds I would like to propose are, first of all, that it's not in conformity with the spatial strategy, because it's outside the settlement boundary and not, in the view of the committee, in a sustainable location. So that's the first thing, that the spatial strategy, specifically that it is not in a sustainable location, particularly with regards to public transport, to access to schools, and to access to any work for people at work, and facilities, other towns that people live in. So it's not in a sustainable location. The second grounds for objection will be on grounds of the impact on the character of the local character of the village and the surrounding area, with caused by this quantum of development, because I think the quantum of I know about there's no upper limit, but I want to get the notion of the quantum of development in there somewhere, so that the harm to the character of the area, including, as was suggested here, and again, officers will advise if this is even relevant, but there's something about the community cohesion in making this village so much bigger than it is now when it has no facilities. So something about community cohesion here in character, and that the third grounds that we had raised is the visual impact on the landscape. So the impact on the landscape from views into the site, not from immediately adjacent to the site, but views into the site from the surrounding area, again with particular reference to the fact that it's not going to be a plan, it's going to be 78 homes with the planning term is the domestic paraphernalia that involves. That's the planning term for it. So can we, those are the three grounds that I've been listening really carefully. Those are the best three I can come up with. If anyone wants to think they can do better, please do. But in the absence of a better idea, I would like to propose that we refuse on those grounds.
I'm happy to second.
Okay, thank you. Yes, they're queuing up to say.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, yes, I'd like to formally propose second.
I formally propose it, yeah.
Refusal.
Okay, thank you for that.
And I think what we need to now is adjourn and see if the officers can
Make it stick.
make it work, make it stick before we vote on it, because I'm not sure that I've got it in quite robust enough language. Is that reasonable? Do you need to adjourn, Hannah, to make this stick, or have I put enough in there?
We also have the 3-hour limit coming up.
Yes.
So
yeah, well,
perhaps ought to take lunch, and if we
No.
No.
We don't
need to do
No,
that.
we carry on.
Yeah.
We'll vote to carry on.
Could we ask Hannah to respond whether there's enough there or whether she needs an adjournment?
Thank you, Jane. I understand the points that have been raised, and we can draft a refusal reason, but that doesn't necessarily mean that multiple weak reasons results in a strong refusal reason. So the officers can draft a refusal reason along those lines, which were out of conformity with the safety strategy, so outside the settlement boundary, not in accordance with the safety strategy, which we have to attach very limited weight to.
Yeah.
We can draft it to include the impact on the character and appearance of the area through the extensions to the countryside and the urbanising effects. But whether that's wrong, we have to decide ourselves. I think in terms of landscape, I think we really do need some landscape points. It's harmful for them to include landscape. So character and appearance, because of it's sort of I think if we're talking about a landscape reason, we need this more visual, maybe if you're looking back into the sites, it'd be more the character and appearance and visual impact of the scheme rather than landscape, because we need to cite some specific receptors it's harmful from if we're going down that route.
Yeah.
We can draft something, and then obviously as we decide, we kept realising that we haven't identified a strong reason, but doing downstream
sustainability as well.
And also the accessibility for the day-to-day needs of the occupiers and dwellings. Yeah.
Could we investigate
Safety of community? Safety?
Well, we can't do it now.
No, there's information, sorry, Chair.
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Chair. There is information on the landscape. If you've been Rob's report, there's the landscape and visual impact, so there wasn't sufficient harm, there wasn't significant harm found there. So the applicant submitted for landscape and visual impact.
I think it's weak, isn't it?
So what do we do? We need to explain why there's a difference in opinion on the evidence that's been submitted. So I think Rob's provided context in the distance views. You will see the scheme, and over time that will be mitigated through landscaping. But there's not we haven't been able to find a harmful impact in terms of the wider landscape setting. And then you've got more immediate views. And again, Rob showed the slides of over time the landscape mitigating the appearance of development more locally. So I think we need to be careful if we're including reasons that we can cite some harm. So this is
there's no
an
harm.
immediate view
No.
of the site. So I think that ties into the character and appearance issues, doesn't it, in terms of the extension of the built form into the countryside. So I don't know if we want to include like landscape issues, because you can see it's relatively well screened with ground forms to the surrounding countryside. It's actually quite limited landscape impact.
Okay, not landscape. You're right. Yeah, so not landscape. Distant views. No.
Can we bring?
All right, then. Not landscape. Not.
Should we just bring in 2 more views?
Yeah.
Councillor Brenton.
I think a word that we need in there for start is proportion. So proportional increase somewhere. Disproportionate, yeah. Excessive proportion. But the bit I'd like to make sure you've got in there is I have serious issues with the road safety aspects for future residents of that site. It is not particularly connected to the rest of the village, and I'm particularly concerned about road crossing or not, and school children accessing school buses, etc., that have a pretty sort of straight down to the road, then walk down the road. I think we need to put some fears for the future safety of junior residents of this site due to the very poor road infrastructure. Something like that.
Okay, thank you. Yes,
Thank you. Yeah, but I think that would be included in the safe and convenient access to services. Yeah. So that would form part of that. Thank you.
Can I get my?
Councillor Taylor.
Can I then emphasise then, Hannah, the fact the connectivity of the area? Sorry.
Can I observe about connectivity of the area for safety aspect? Because that's
You've just done that.
Safety issue and safety harming. That's a big word here. That is not needed here to add all to this application. So therefore, as what Councillor Brenton said, it's safeguard of the community, as in be safe in their environment, travel and water and do whatever. So that's why I think, do we have that condition quite strong against the application?
Just don't know if it's strong enough.
Go ahead on that.
Sorry, Joe, could you give that question to Carol? Are you talking about what we proposed from planning conditions? About the future reason?
Basically, looking at the total application for it is itself. The fact of saying we're going to build something that is a community area.
Yeah, but you could say that about Commerwick.
Live and work and walk in the area, and it's the safeguarding, and that's for the community. Safeguarding is quite paramount to this, especially the adults, children, and people with disabilities, difficulties. We haven't even talked on that yet. So that's my problem.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, in terms of the highway authority's comments, it is safe in highway terms. It does provide adequate pavements and connectivity to the adjacent sites, which actually provides
but not to the school.
A link off the road to that sort of play area for the whole village, because you can walk on pavements to the play area now rather than along the road. So in the context of the site and how it's connected to the existing development, the officer's view is that it is safe. There's no highway safety or pedestrian safety reason that we could cite in a refusal reason. So, and it has been considered.
Sorry. So therefore, we've got the possibility of highways issue, which we know is wrong. We know there are no pavements. We know that there is no safety for the people walking up and down the highways to get to where they get thing. So therefore, have we got a condition here of actually asking highways, why did we come to this decision when it's not safe?
No, well,
because I don't think that's my concern. It's not safe. And that's what I'm saying. Even crossing to the play area across the road, it's not safe.
That is safe.
I'm sorry, but it's just not safe. And therefore, these cars can go at 30 miles an hour. That will kill someone. Yeah, they're not 20, not 50 miles an hour. So therefore, my concern is that you're actually in a kind of a prison. We can't go out.
That's rubbish. No. That's gone too far. That's gone too far.
Highway's not there. It's not safe. And therefore, I really do disagree with highway saying it's okay.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. I think that ties into the safety, convenience, access to services, which I just noted through Councillor Benson's question, so
Right.
it has been considered.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Access to other.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you. Councillor Jespers.
so I propose we've had the seconder. I think I'm looking at the clock. I think we probably need, if Hannah would be good enough to read out the grounds again, I think we probably ought to be putting this to the vote. And in case colleagues think I have over urged, you know, the point is we have to be sure that we think this is defendable. We're having a go, but we have to be sure we think this is defendable. So yeah, so I think would you read it out again? Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. We're just going to adjourn very shortly for just 5 minutes.
Yes, yeah, and then people.
Okay, everyone, we're ready. I'll hand the microphone to Hannah.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. So the split is into two reviews of reasons. It's one centred around the conflict, spatial strategy and access to services, and the other one's relating to character and appearance of the area. So the first refusal is drafted as the site lies outside of the settlement boundary over Fitzpaine and as such is located within the open countryside. The proposed development would not represent a type of development that would be appropriate in the countryside or otherwise have a demonstrable overriding need for a countryside location and would lack safe and convenient access to a sufficient range of services to meet the day-to-day needs of the occupiers and dwellings. Development of the site would therefore represent an unsustainable form of development contrary to the spatial strategy of the adopted development plan, specifically policies 2, 6 and 20, the North Dorset Local Plan, Part 1 and the National Planning Policy Framework. Second refusal reason relates to character and appearance. The development results in harms to the character and appearance of the area through the quantum of the development proposed and its urbanising effect on this edge of settlement location. This would be contrary to policy 4 and 24 of the North Dorset Local Plan and NPPF.
Yes, that'll do.
Okay, thank you. I think we're ready to test it and go to the vote. Yeah, we're going to go to the vote, everyone. So those who are in favour of the proposal, which is by Councillor Jesperson to refuse the application, and seconded by Councillor McGree. So all those who are in favour of refusal. Unanimous. 6 in favour. I think we're unanimous.
Yeah.
None against. So
let's just hope it's defendable.
And on that basis, planning permission is refused for this application. It is E/FUL/2025/03574 and North of Castle Avenue at Fitzpaine. Okay, so that's the end of agenda item 5.
The end of the meeting.
Item number 6, that's already been deferred. Don't believe there are any urgent items, John. There's no exempt business. So I think we're going to end the meeting in the nick of time at 12:56 on the 17th of March 2026. Thank you everybody for coming today and for all the hard work.